Omega pretended to be Alpha to enroll in school, claiming to be sober and independent, but quietly enjoying the love and care of my boyfriend. Later, my boyfriend left me, who was in a susceptible period, and went to protect Omega. You can just bite anyone you want during your susceptible period. Don't be so pretentious. He is who needs care. But he didn't know that Omega had secretly replaced my medication, causing my asthma to be triggered during my susceptible period, and my life was hanging by a thread. When we met again half a year later, he knelt down and begged for my forgiveness. The tall Alpha professor held me in his arms, exposing his neck and letting me nibble on the mark, full of pampering. My lover is in a sensitive period and has no time to care about you. Don't mess with him. I made him cry last night and I haven't comforted him yet. 01. The Department of Mechanical Engineering only recruits Alpha students. The course is intensive and requires heavy physical training. It is a well-known devilish major. I haven't been feeling well lately, and during long-distance training I paddled and purposely fell behind the group. There was a unique milky scent of pheromones in the air, and Riley gradually caught up with me. The sportswear is tied loosely at the waist, outlining the slender waist. He couldn't run anymore after the 17th lap. He bit his lower lip with his pearly teeth, and his pretty face was pale. I casually ran twice to overtake him, only to see his body shake violently. He looked at me as if I were his mortal enemy, with anger burning in his eyes. I curled my lips lightly. Why does Omega want to compete with Alpha in physical strength? The next second, Riley suddenly clenched his fists and ran after me, risking his life to run, and finally crossed the finish line with me. Haha, I'm no worse than you. After a fierce roar, Riley coughed up a few drops of blood from the corner of his mouth. His body suddenly lost strength and fell backwards, like a light feather, falling fragilely and helplessly into the darkness. At this moment, a strong force pushed me away from behind, and her boyfriend Connor went over and caught Riley steadily. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red. Oliver, you know Riley is Why are you fighting with him? Can't you just give in? 02. Connor and I grew up together, and even though we were both alphas, we still fell in love and started dating. Connor naturally dislikes weak omegas until his roommate Riley shows up. Riley is competitive in everything and stands out among the freshmen. Later, Riley failed to properly inject the inhibitor, exposing his secret. He gritted his teeth and begged us. Mechanics is my lifelong dream. I must study. I don't want to be like those omegas who are bound by marriage and family for the rest of their lives. Please. Of course omegas can study, and there are many majors to choose from, but the mechanical major really does not allow omegas, which is as strange as a girl insisting on using the men's restroom. This is not sexism, it is determined by biological structure. Unexpectedly, Connor believed it and said, Riley is different from those omegas. From then on, Riley's shadow was always around Connor, and my clothes were stained with the milky scent of Riley's pheromones, which made me very irritated. At this time, Riley would lean on Connor's shoulder and joke like a good brother. Why is your boyfriend as sensitive and suspicious as an omega? I can't possibly date you. I'm sober and independent and only want to pursue my career. Okay. Connor laughed at him. He was like a different person, trusting and accepting Riley. Riley is competitive and always gets himself bruised and battered, intentionally or unintentionally exposing his vulnerable side to Connor. At this time, Connor would subconsciously pity him, appreciate him, and take care of him, just like now. Connor looked at me as a sinister and scheming vicious woman. After venting his anger, he picked up Riley and ran towards the infirmary without even giving me a spare glance. Our relationship suddenly seemed ridiculous. 03. Oliver, you don't look right. Are you okay? My rapid breathing caught the attention of the squad leader. He came over and patted my shoulder. I suddenly grabbed his arm as if I had been electrocuted and threw him hard over my shoulder. Wow, you're so fierce. You must be susceptible to the virus. Go back and rest and stop causing harm to others. During the susceptible period, alphas are very averse to same-sex touch, become angry and violent, and want to mark everything as their own property. Every vulnerable period we spent with Connor was torture for us. He rarely agreed to let me take a bite. After all, it felt terrible to be labeled as gay. Sometimes I would bite him secretly, and he would get angry and fight with me. When he ran out of energy and passed out, the susceptible period would be over in a daze. It seems Connor took Riley to the infirmary. He said the infirmary is closed. Can you make it by yourself? The monitor kindly escorted me to the dormitory door. He knew that Connor and I were a couple, and he even called Connor. I waved my hand and sent the squad leader away. The rapid breathing in my chest didn't seem to calm down, and my throat began to itch. I realized that it might be my old asthma problem. I took out a pill from the drawer and put it in my mouth, then turned around and started throwing the things Connor gave me. I don't have the patience to haggle over details. If I'm not happy, I'll just break up with him, her directly to avoid wasting each other's time. Suddenly, the feeling of suffocation surged up like a tidal wave. I fell heavily on the floor, holding my throat with both hands and breathing desperately, and my body began to twitch uncontrollably. How could that be? I took the medicine. Is there something wrong with the medicine? I couldn't even scream. When I was about to lose consciousness, I randomly unlocked my phone and dialed for help. Save! No matter who the call was made to. Help me. Oliver, stop it. I really can't leave right now. The infirmary is full of alphas, and I'm worried something might happen to Riley. You can bite anyone you want during your susceptible period. Don't be so pretentious as an alpha. 04. The feeling of being near death is not pleasant. I was still conscious, but I couldn't breathe no matter how hard I tried. I could feel myself being carried into the hospital, with doctors and nurses surrounding me and trying to save me. Why is this alpha still in his susceptible period? Doesn't he have a partner? The emergency room was filled with my leaked pheromones, and even the alpha doctor's hands were shaking. He switched me to the maximum dose of inhibitor. The moment the cold needle pierced my arm, a warm breath enveloped me. Wait a minute, I'll comfort him. Maybe the asthma medicine was working, and fresh air slowly flowed into my lungs. This strange tall man picked me up, tore open the collar of my shirt with one hand, and carefully released some pheromones. He is also an alpha, but I didn't hesitate and bit down on his neck, instinctively wanting to mark him and make him mine. My teeth pierced his skin, and the pungent kerosene smell in his pheromones rushed straight into my mind and exploded in my blood, but it inexplicably soothed my restless heartbeat. A second before I lost consciousness, I heard the man whisper hoarsely, "The little guy is pretty fierce." I fell asleep in his arms, feeling indescribably safe. When I woke up again, the ward was quiet and my Omega father was talking to the doctor outside. Click. Connor got up from the sofa and walked to my bed with a stern face. "Oliver, I didn't expect you to be like this. Are you going to make a scene like this if I don't accompany you through your susceptible period? If you do this, it will only make me hate you more and more." I closed my eyes, took a few deep breaths, and then hooked my finger at him. Connor frowned and walked towards me. "You feel bad, don't you? You deserve it. Do you think I'll feel bad if you use this method?" When he approached, I pulled out the 4 and punched him hard. I hit him so hard that his nose bled and he fell face down on the tiles. "Feeling bad? I'll make you feel bad all over. From today on, I'll beat you up every time I see you." 05. Connor and I had a big fight and an unprecedented Cold War broke out. After testing, it was found that my pills had indeed been swapped. The dormitory is for 4 people and 1 bed is unoccupied. The remaining 2 people are Connor and Riley. It's obvious who did this, but without surveillance, Riley wouldn't admit it. Accusations without evidence will only make me look down on you. The innocent are innocent, so don't involve me in your couple's quarrels. Riley raised his chin and glared at me coldly, then straightened his back, picked up his school bag and went to class. Behind him, Connor looked horrified. "Oliver, where's your medicine? Did your illness occur because your medicine was replaced? This is murder." Connor's voice trembled slightly. He rushed over to grab my hand, but I punched him on the nose. The loud noise scared Riley so much that he froze. I smiled faintly and zipped up Riley's backpack. I haven't said anything yet. Are you feeling guilty? I just want to tell you that if I had been in trouble that day, the murderer would be charged with murder. I am fine now, so he is charged with attempted murder. Both will lead to jail time. I will get to the bottom of this matter. The color drained from Riley's face, and he pretended to be calm and warned me. Don't be so malicious towards me just because I'm an Omega. I just want to study hard and don't want to compete with you. This is a school and anyone can enter our dormitory. Riley was confident that Connor would help him. His eyes flashed with despair and fragility, and he staggered towards Connor. But he didn't know. In order to take care of his Omega, Connor replaced our door and window locks with the latest models. He also never allowed anyone else to step into the dormitory door, and any problems had to be solved outside the door. This time, Connor looked at Riley differently. 06. During the entire professional class, Connor ignored Riley. Of course, I ignored him. The professional course teacher took a leave of absence, and the substitute was a very young male Professor Gavin, who taught professional courses for third years. His slender legs were wrapped in black jeans, and he wore a neatly ironed gray shirt on his upper body, with half of his underwear faintly visible at the collar. He had broad shoulders and a narrow waist, sword-like eyebrows and star-like eyes, and his facial features were cold. If he were any other Omega Major, he would definitely become a popular person and win countless hearts. But in the eyes of Alpha, he is just a very aggressive fellow who is not easy to mess with. Connor kept messaging me throughout the entire class, and when I didn't reply, he stopped me at the podium at the end of the class. He was still a little scared and said sorry to me many times, then asked me cautiously with red eyes, "Riley, I will investigate and deal with this. I didn't know you were wronged like this. Can you give me a chance to atone for my sins? I said I'd fight you every time I see you, didn't I? Do I have to forgive him if he admits his mistakes and corrects them?" I dropped my school bag, moved my shoulders left and right, and was about to punch when a pair of big hands suddenly grabbed me from behind. "Oliver, fighting in the classroom is not good. Come to my office and talk." Gavin stood on the podium and looked at me. His tall figure completely enveloped me, giving me an indescribable feeling of oppression. Before I could even open my mouth, Connor got angry and asked him coldly, "Oliver and I have something to talk about. Is Gavin close to him? Why do you call the students away to talk alone? You are just a substitute teacher." Gavin pouted his chin impatiently, lowered his eyes to look at me, and then tore off the suppression patch on his neck with one hand. The pungent smell of kerosene slowly dissipated, mixed with a subtle hint of ebony, which was clean and a little bitter, and stunned Connor and I for a moment. "That's the smell of my pheromones. Are I close to Oliver? It's okay. He just bit me and marked me as his property. Do you think that's close?" 07. It turns out that the person I bit in the hospital that day was him. Alpha cannot be labeled by its own kind. Being injected with pheromones by one's own kind is a painful and humiliating thing, and it takes many days to metabolize it completely. Connor hated the smell of me and would always lose his temper with me and even fight with me. Even if we were the closest of lovers, his cleanliness and self-esteem would not allow this to happen. But now, Connor's eyes instantly turned red with hatred, and he tightly grasped my arm and asked, "Why does he have your pheromones? I'm your boyfriend. It's the ex-boyfriend. Do you want to be beaten again?" I said this coldly, and the sour smell of wine spread in the air. Connor released pheromones crazily, his emotional breakdown mixed with raging rage, trying to shock everyone in this way. The classroom was cleared quickly, and even I felt choked. Gavin curled his lips into a faint smile, lowered his eyes and closed the reference book. The next second, a stronger smell of kerosene exploded in the air, ferociously swallowing up the smell of wine, rushing around, and bringing a nearly suffocating feeling of fear. Gavin is an S-level alpha. Connor was suppressed to the point of turning pale, his body shaking uncontrollably, and he couldn't utter a complete sentence. I also started to sweat profusely and my hands and feet became weak. At this moment, a strong arm wrapped around my waist and pulled me into his arms. "Connor, you seem to smell like milk. Are you related to Oliver?" I was just marked by him, but now I belong to him. Please make way. The fear suppressed by pheromones made me dare not move at all. I squeezed out a few broken sobs from my throat, which in return made Gavin smile softly. I am obviously 1.80 meters tall, but Gavin easily picked me up with one hand, picked up the reference book with the other hand, and left the classroom calmly. As the smell of kerosene dissipated, Connor knelt on the ground exhausted, his entire back soaked with sweat. His body was tense and he was unable to raise his head in humiliation. His chest rose and fell violently with every breath, as if he was about to spew out endless anger. After an unknown amount of time, a soft, cold little hand gently pulled the corner of his clothes. Connor, help me. I feel so bad. It turns out that Riley had been staying in the classroom and peeking. The continuous alpha pheromones sent him straight into the fever phase. A few rays of light ignited in Connor's gloomy eyes, slowly falling on Riley's flushed face. 08. Gavin took me into a private office and placed me on a large desk. After I came to my senses, I immediately jumped off the table to apologize to him and even tore up a check and asked him to fill in the number. Gavin unbuttoned his cuffs and glanced at me nonchalantly. Do you think I'm charging per visit? My scalp was tingling, and I didn't know how to explain it. Gavin suddenly came over and stretched out his arms to corner me. Student, if you bite someone, you have to take responsibility, right? Didn't hygiene class teach you what to do next? You are my first man. I have been chaste for 30 years, but you smell all over my body these past 2 days. Many people have smelled it. You're just going to send me off with a check? Gavin came very close to me, his hot breath spraying on my face, making my heart beat wildly. I explain, although I broke up, I don't want to end it so soon. This is such an accident. What else do you think I should do? Gavin pursed his lips, and a hint of smile flashed across his dark eyes. He said, "It has come to this. You have ruined my innocence. If my lover's pheromones disappear inexplicably, how will they look at me?" Gavin from the mechanical engineering department finally had a relationship, but he was dumped in less than a week. I am so embarrassed. It would be normal to date for at least a year before breaking up peacefully, right? I scratched my hair irritably. But the professor is an S-level alpha, and I don't dare to mess with him. So what you mean is that I want to. Gavin shrugged helplessly and unbuttoned the second and third buttons of his shirt with one hand, revealing the already faded teeth marks. We're just starting to date and we're probably still in the honeymoon period. The smell of ebony on me seems to have faded, right? Just bite him 2 more times. That's fine. We are all men and we are all alphas, so no one takes advantage of anyone else. I calmed my pounding heart, moved forward, grabbed Gavin's arm, and pressed my lips against his neck. Okay, just accept it. I won't suffer any loss anyway. The moment the teeth pierced my skin, my phone and his phone rang at the same time, and then various groups in the school popped up messages frantically. Shocking news. Riley from the mechanical department is an Omega. He is crawling around the streets during his fever period. Look. 09. Riley tried to seek Connor's protection during the fever, curled up fragilely at Connor's feet, tears of broken despair rolling down his cheeks. But this time, Connor just called the rescue station and left him to fend for himself. I really hate disgusting and troublesome Omegas like you. Am I your father? Do I have to control everything you do? The sweet, milky aroma spread from the classroom to the entire teaching building, affecting countless alphas and making them eager to take action. In order to survive, Riley had to run to an open area. He crawled around using his hands and feet, as if he had been fished out of the water, with no dignity at all. Connor noticed that I was also watching and immediately ran over to explain. You want to see if I will help him, right? I am very clear-headed now. I am not affected by Riley at all. You know I am physically disgusted by delicate Omegas like Riley. You're giving me a headache. I just came to see if Riley is still awake. The police just sent me a message that half a fingerprint was found on the pills he stole. He will be investigated. Connor's face turned pale. Riley opened his eyes wide in horror, gradually being consumed by despair. 10. Overnight, Riley's affair became known to the whole school. He did break federal law by switching my asthma medication. However, the Omega Protection Act stipulates that an Omega between the ages of 18 and 30 can only be sent to prison if he or she has given birth at least once. After all, population reproduction is an Omega's most important responsibility. In other words, Riley will only receive a school-notified disciplinary action at this time. As for him pretending to be Alpha and sneaking into the mechanical department, on his first day back on campus, he instigated an Omega equality movement. He questioned the gender discrimination in the admissions of the Department of Mechanical Engineering and used public opinion to put pressure on the college to force it to allow him to continue studying in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. On the first day of his junior year, Riley downplayed his mistakes and spoke of his ambitions. "I admit that I made a mistake, but that's a mistake every Omega will make. I was too jealous of the naturally excellent Alphas. Why are they born elites, while we Omegas always rank behind? I'm standing here again just to tell everyone. 8 years ago, Senior Mason became the #1 Omega in the Mecha department. 8 years later, I will also break new ground and become the best Omega in the Mecha department." Riley put on some light makeup, and her delicate and beautiful face glowed with a noble and inviolable cold light, which attracted the envy and admiration of countless people in the audience. But he probably doesn't know. Mason is a rare genius in the Mecha department in a century, and he may not have such talent. More importantly, a mechanic is not the same as a Jaeger commander. He will understand in the first professional class of his junior year that the mechanic is the life of the mecha. In an interstellar battlefield with no escape, the final material used to repair the mecha is the alpha mechanic himself. Omega's naturally fragile bones are destined to be unsuitable for mecha material. 11. Before the formal classes start in the third year, the Department of Mechanical Engineering will first conduct a physical fitness assessment to test the results of the previous 2 years of training. A group of 4 people, without carrying any supplies, will be qualified if they can cross the tropical jungle and reach the designated location within 48 hours. They must get the mecha blueprint on the way. After the draw, I was assigned to a group with Connor Riley and the squad leader. After changing into black training uniforms, the squad leader subconsciously praised me. "Oliver, your long legs are so showy. A handsome guy would look good even in a sack." Connor immediately smiled and said, "Oliver has been very handsome since he was a child. I have always been fascinated by him." I glanced at him calmly. "Thank you, but you look so stupid trying to win me back. Just shut up." Connor's smile froze on his face immediately, and he looked at a loss. Riley had already set off. The uniform-sized training uniform was loose on him, but he had to tie it very tightly around his waist. His slender and fragile figure attracted the attention of the alphas. He himself didn't care at all. He was so open and honest that he didn't even use the suppression patch. The milky fragrance lingering around him made everyone feel itchy. He turned around and reminded us, "I just want to pass the physical fitness test. My mind is on studying. Can you guys catch up quickly?" Connor immediately sneered and said, "You're pretending again. So cheap." Although he cursed harshly, his eyes couldn't help but follow Riley. Every time Riley made a mistake, Connor would immediately scold him, complain about him, and direct all his malice towards him. However, when other alphas approach Riley, he will drive the alpha away and not let others touch Riley. This is quite interesting if you stare at it for a long time. I've known Connor for over a decade, and his intentions are obvious. Did he hate Riley? I see that he is gradually being attracted to Riley again, and his heart is wavering, which is really disgusting. More than 20 hours later, we had to cross a swamp. We could slide to the other side with the help of vines, which required the weight of 2 people to hold down. Connor and the squad leader slid over first to check the situation. After confirming it was safe, I took Riley with me. About 15 minutes later, Connor gave a signal and Riley held the vine tightly and asked me if I wanted to leave. I curled my lips coldly and reached out to grab the back of his collar. "You forgot, we still have a debt to settle." 12. This was the only chance I had to be alone with Riley since I called the police for the investigation. I slowly took out a bottle of fake medicine, the same kind he had stolen. Riley's face suddenly changed, but he couldn't run away. I quickly tied him up with vines, pried open his mouth and poured a whole bottle of fake medicine into it, letting him eat enough at once. He switched concepts, created confrontations, and exploited legal loopholes, so I have no choice but to punish him in my own way. Riley broke down in tears, retching and struggling. I grabbed the vines and slid him to the other side. The strong wind drowned out all his cries for help. After landing, Riley vomited violently, curled up his body, and didn't even dare to say a complete sentence. I said calmly, "He's too scared. We don't have much time. Let's go." Connor immediately pulled the squad leader to catch up with me. "Haha. This disgusting Omega is pretending to be pitiful again. So pitiful." Riley broke down and cried for a long time. Half an hour later, she wiped her tears and came back. Her eyes were so gloomy and uncomfortable. "We have walked to the marked location, but did not find the mecha blueprint. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. It was about to get dark and we had to find something warm as soon as possible. However, we hadn't found the blueprints yet and our progress was far behind." Riley immediately grabbed my arm and said, "Oliver and I will continue to look for the blueprints. We will divide the work. I don't know what tricks he is playing, but we don't have much time left, so we really need to divide the work and cooperate." I left him and went into the jungle to look for him alone. A few minutes later, Riley fell into the trap and asked me for help. "My leg seems to be broken. Oliver, are you there? Please save me." There was no way I would pay any attention to him. I even ran a few quick steps away from him. "But who knows?" Riley cried and said, "Oliver, you heard me calling for help, didn't you? Are you going to bring your personal grudges to the interstellar battlefield and abandon your teammates and companions? I really looked down on you." I stopped. At this moment, a strong milky smell suddenly exploded from the air, and Riley actually cut his arm to release pheromones. Under the impact of Omega pheromones, my brain instinctively went blank for a few seconds. Riley took the opportunity to entangle me, pinching my neck and falling straight into the bottomless black hole. "Honestly, I really want to hate you. You are an alpha, but you are so beautiful. Your family is rich, and Connor loves you wholeheartedly. Why do you get all the benefits? How am I inferior to you? I really hope you die." 13. Riley used me as a cushion and smashed me to the bottom of the pit. I was completely unconscious for half an hour. When I woke up, Connor and the squad leader had both jumped down. Riley knelt behind him and broke down in tears. I saw Oliver fall, but I couldn't save him, so I had to cut my arm and use pheromones to ask for help from you. Luckily, you came. Shut up. Your stink is everywhere. Oliver, if anything happens to you, I won't forgive you." Connor was cursing beside me, but he tore off half of his sleeve and bandaged Riley himself without even looking at me. The squad leader asked me cautiously if I could still move and what happened. Riley looked at me warily, ready to bite back at any moment. His scheming look was really funny. If I get involved with him, I will become as disgusting as him. I got up from the ground numbly. I saw where the blueprints were when we were falling. Let's get them and leave quickly. We don't have much time. Riley wiped the tears from his cheeks and a smug smile appeared on his lips. Along with the drawings were 2 bars of chocolate, our only food. Connor immediately snatched it and handed it to me, while he kept lecturing Riley. "You have no share in this kind of thing, you know that? You'll only hinder us along the way. Omega, you're such a hassle." The pain in my body kept screaming, and I didn't have the patience to pay attention to Connor. I turned around and continued walking towards the finish line. It started to rain heavily after midnight, and nothing could be seen except the faint light from the floodlights. The squad leader suggested that we rest on the spot. He quickly built a makeshift camp and the 4 men huddled inside. Connor started complaining again. "It's so annoying. I hate being so close to an Omega. Can you please just get away?" Probably because the wound on my back was getting inflamed, I quickly passed out again. It was only 4 hours later that the squad leader woke me up. Oliver, you seem to have a fever. Can you hold on? You haven't eaten for more than a day. Let me ask Connor for a piece of chocolate for you. Took me a long time to get up from the ground. Just as I was about to say no, Connor and Riley came back one after another, pushing aside the bushes. Connor still looked unhappy, but Riley's face was flushed and she lowered her head shyly, with a little chocolate crumbs on the corners of her pink lips. 14. It is clear what they do when they are alone. Oliver, you look so bad. Can I help you walk? Riley pretended to care about me, with a hint of victory in his eyes. He seemed to be showing off to me, showing off how Connor favored him, gave him all the chocolates, and took care of him with a hard mouth but a soft heart. I shouted at the monitor to hurry up and didn't bother to pay attention to Riley. After walking for another 4 or 5 hours, I accidentally tripped over a rock and Riley rushed up to me again and asked, "Let me help you." Roll. Connor finally couldn't stand it anymore and came out to discuss with me. After all, Riley saved your life, and we are all teammates, so stop being angry for now, Oliver. I turned around and punched Connor in the face. You believe everything he says. I even said I'm Riley's dad. Do you believe it? The next second, a playful voice sounded from a distance. It seems that you still have the energy to fight? Looking up, I saw a pair of straight long legs, a black vest wrapped around a strong upper body, and a training jacket casually draped over the shoulders. It's Gavin. He is one of the instructors for this assessment. He said frankly that the finish line was just a few hundred meters away, but he didn't intend to let us pass so easily. Don't you still have the energy to fight? Now, everyone, do 200 push-ups on the spot. Riley was so scared that his face turned pale, but we all leaned over and started to do it, so he had no choice but to strike a pose, barely supporting himself on the ground with his hands. Gavin walked over coldly and kicked him on the limp waist. Be more regular. Is this all you can do to become the top Omega? Riley whimpered and fell into the mud, explaining painfully, Professor, my arm is already injured. Gavin asked him calmly, why? After eating 2 bars of chocolate, you can't even do a push-up. How did you get the injury on your arm? Don't you know? 15. Riley shuddered guiltily and looked away in panic. Connor stepped forward to explain for him. No, Professor. Riley cut his arm on purpose to ask us for help. Oliver accidentally fell into the pit, and he tried to save Oliver. Whether you saved your teammates or framed them, we will know when we review the situation. But now, I didn't ask you to stop doing push-ups. Add another 200. Riley is lazy, add 202. Connor clenched his fists and slowly released pheromones to express his anger. Gavin decisively kicked him on the shoulder and sent him flying several meters away. If you don't agree, add 400. As soon as I finished speaking, I spoke hoarsely from the side. I have completed 200. Can I move on? Gavin turned around and looked me up and down, his dark eyes filled with many complex emotions. I licked my cracked lips, took the team badge from the squad leader's pocket, and ran towards the finish line as hard as I could. After doing 200 push-ups, the wound on my back opened and bled again, mixed with sweat and almost stained my entire clothes, and the smell of ebony and agarwood also slowly leaked out. Connor realized what was happening and his expression changed. When I fell across the finish line, he ran towards me, screaming, Oliver, I didn't know you were so badly injured. I'm sorry, but he was one step too late. I fell into a warm and strong embrace, and a large coat stained with the scent of Alpha's pheromones fell over my head, wrapping me tightly. Congratulations. You have now won first place on behalf of the team. I heard Gavin's low and hoarse voice. He took advantage of the hug to rub the back of my neck roughly. Also, I want to express my dissatisfaction. You are full of the stench of that Omega. If I smell it again, I will punish you until your legs become weak. 16. The overbearing scent of the S-level pheromone completely enveloped me, unexpectedly making me feel extremely safe. So I leaned into Gavin's arms and endured the dizziness of a few minutes due to low blood sugar. Connor stood a few steps away and looked at us quietly, with redness at the corners of his eyes. Just now, he had understood something from Gavin's words. He wanted to explain, but his chest felt like it was being pressed down by a huge rock, and it hurt so much that he couldn't breathe. After 5 minutes, I regained some strength and slowly pushed Gavin away. Riley had already reached the finish line and showed a beautiful smile. Are we number one? Haha, I knew it. With our abilities, we will definitely. He had only said half of his words when I suddenly grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up. He was suffocating and his face turned red as he struggled desperately. I slapped him to keep quiet. Then he dragged him all the way to the edge of the slope, and regardless of his screams and pleas for mercy, he kicked him hard. I tolerate you not because I'm afraid of you, but because I need to complete the assessment. You don't deserve to be wasted by me. You accused me of abandoning my teammates, but what did you do to me? You tricked me into falling into a trap, and you wanted me dead. I will not abandon any of my companions on the battlefield, but I am ashamed to have a companion like you. Whoever teams up with you will be unlucky for the rest of their lives. 17. I kicked Riley and broke 3 of his ribs, and the prosthesis in his nose was crooked. It took a month of recuperation before returning to class. Of course, I wasn't much better either. The wound became inflamed and I had to receive intravenous drips for a whole week. My back was rotten and bloody. Gavin didn't hold anyone accountable, assuming that all our grievances had been resolved privately. From then on, Riley would take a detour whenever he saw me. Our group won first place in the assessment and will have an opportunity to study on the front line before graduating from our senior year. Before that, you have to study 2 years of professional knowledge courses. The news that Gavin and I were dating also spread. In order to maintain his face, I diligently bite him once a week to fulfill my indenture. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was enjoying this relationship. He would boldly use my pheromones to claim his sovereignty, and would calmly call me when the whole class was making a noise. Then let my boyfriend answer the following question. No matter how busy I am at work, he will accompany me through the entire susceptible period and never leave my side. Just bite gently. I have classes in the afternoon. I had never been so pampered during my susceptible period, so I became even more aggressive in occupying his office, wearing his suit jacket, sitting on his lap and biting him wildly. The feeling of marking S-level alpha is so cool. Just after midnight, the house was filled with a choking pheromone smell. I didn't know when Connor appeared at the office door, holding an ice cream cake that had long melted in his hands, and my 22nd birthday present. His throat was choked with sobs, and with red eyes he softly called my name, Oliver. We agreed to celebrate our birthdays together every year. Have you forgotten? I was too stupid and foolish in the past, and was deceived by Riley so many times. Can you still forgive me? I didn't even want to look back at him, so I just buried my head in Gavin's chest and rubbed against him, causing the man to hug me tighter. He tapped the table with his slender index finger. Connor, it's not working hours now. Please leave my office. My lover is in a sensitive period and has no time to pay attention to you. Don't mess with him. I made him cry last night and I haven't comforted him yet. The cake in Connor's hand slipped to the ground and broke into pieces. Tears immediately welled up in his eyes, as if the last string of rationality in his brain was broken. A long time after he left, my mind became clearer and I broke the silence in the office by speaking. Actually, we are fake, right? Do you want to make it clear now? Gavin rested his chin on the top of my head and laughed a few times. His voice was lazy and hoarse. Then make it clear. There are not so many coincidences in the world. Everything is planned by me. I like the flowers in spring, the trees in summer, the dusk in autumn, the sunshine in winter, and you every day. Don't rush to respond to me. I will wait patiently for your answer. Teen. Before graduating from our senior year, our group of 4 will go to the front line for a study tour. In recent years, the federal war has continued, and it is the dream of every mechanical student to be able to touch the latest mecha in service on the front line. When we reported to the base, we happened to catch a wave of offensive warfare, and the commander only had a few minutes to assign us tasks. Riley was the only Omega, and was about to introduce his outstanding achievements, but the commander simply skipped over him and patted my shoulder. Hello again, Oliver. In an instant, many eyes were focused on me. Simply because my alpha father was also a top mechanic, and he was buried on this interstellar battlefield. And now I am determined to embark on the same path. Amidst the noise, only Riley sneered softly. It was probably some incompetent mechanic who risked his life. A mechanic's job is just to repair mechas. Wouldn't he run away if there was danger? I heard it, but I didn't argue with him. If he goes to the front line with this mentality, reality will be his best retribution. The commander had very limited time. He assigned us tasks and left in a hurry. Before leaving, he seemed to remember something and asked me, "By the way, I heard that you are very familiar with Professor Gavin? It has only been 3 years since he left his position as commander and transferred to the Department of Mechanical Engineering to teach." I was stunned for a moment. The truth is, I didn't know Gavin well enough to know about this past. Was he once a mecha commander? Just as he was about to ask again, a shrill alarm sounded in the base. 19. The base was experiencing an emergency and our studies were interrupted, and we even had to fill the shortage of mechanics and go directly to the front line. The commander would never allow students to get involved unless it was absolutely necessary, which showed how serious the situation was. The commander assigned us a relatively simple task, but it still required us to cross the fire blockade, which was somewhat dangerous. Still in groups of 4? No problem. I'm the squad leader, and I'll definitely protect you all. No, it's a solo operation. The commander announced the decision with a heavy face, and then the air fell into deathly silence. I agreed without hesitation. Connor hesitated for a few seconds, then silently took off the amulet that had been hanging on his chest for more than 20 years and put it in my hand. I threw it on the table. At this time, Riley said confidently, "I'm sorry, I'm an Omega. Isn't there an Alpha mechanic who can take over first?" In an instant, all eyes were focused on him, but he thought he was superior and told everyone that he was an Omega in the mechanical department with excellent grades, and that he was the only special case and should not be the first to run to the front line to die. When he organized his speech again, the commander slapped him in the face. "Cowards are not welcome in my base. You chose this path yourself. No matter what gender you are, there will be no preferential treatment." Riley was completely panicked and put on his combat uniform tremblingly. He gently pulled Connor with his soft little hands, and his broken tears rolled down fiercely. "Connor, I'm special, you know that? This is not something I should do. I'm afraid I can't bear it. Please help me." This time, Connor didn't even glance at him. 20. In the first 4 hours after we set out, we maintained close contact with the base, but with Riley's scream in the headset and a huge bang that hit our eardrums, all contact was cut off. The sound of the explosion seemed to come from the direction of the squad leader. "Oliver? Great. I found you." A strong smell of blood mixed with wine wafted into my nose, and Connor ran towards me covered in blood. He could no longer control the leaking pheromones, so you can imagine how badly he was injured. It was said that there were problems internally and that our casualties were heavy. I was unwilling to continue to complete the task, but Connor held my hand tightly and gave up struggling. "Don't waste your energy. The base is gone. We may not be able to leave here. Honestly, Oliver, if I could spend the last moments of my life with you, I would have no regrets. So what if Gavin is better than me? I'll be buried with you in the end. It's me who has your blood mixed with mine after all." Hatred gradually dyed my eyes red. I turned around, squatted down and punched Connor hard a few times, completely disappointed in him. "So you don't understand what responsibility and mission are. The way you give up and lie down now is a perfect match for Riley, who is running away from the battlefield. If you want to die, die by yourself, but I still have to complete the mission and go home." Connor struggled and vomited a few mouthfuls of blood, but he smiled paranoidly and crazily, and refused to let go of my hand no matter what. At this time, the earphones that had been disconnected for a long time were reconnected to the signal, and a low and hoarse voice sounded. "Mechanical research team, the base has been destroyed and the commander has lost contact. What's your situation?" My heart skipped a beat and I quickly reported the information to Gavin. A few seconds later, he gave me some accurate coordinates, planned a mission route for me, and tried to call my companions. Before the signal was cut off, he suddenly called my name. In fact, I was one of the commanders of the battle in which your father died. I was the closest to him at the time and witnessed the explosion with my own eyes. I was immersed in nightmares and self-blame for a long time, regretting that I didn't do anything. I even stepped back to teach until I met you. You are a very charming person, strong, persistent, and excellent. My eyes always follow you involuntarily. You also made me understand that fighting for faith and mission until the last second of life is the best ending for a mechanic. There were some heavy breathing sounds coming from the headphones, and Connor woke up without knowing when. He lay quietly on the ground, looking at me, a tear rolling down the corner of his eye. He heard it all. Before the signal disappeared, I heard Gavin say to me in a very soft voice, "Blatant love is redemption. Oliver, please finish your mission quickly and come back to see me. I'm waiting for your answer." 21. Our study plan ended hastily in the chaos. I was the only one who completed the task assigned by the commander and returned safely with the seriously injured Connor. Riley tried to blend into the team protecting Omega and escape together, but he was too famous and was quickly recognized and scolded by people. "Aren't you trying to break gender discrimination? Aren't you the best Omega in the mechanical department? Why are you running away at this moment?" Riley was quickly driven away, but fortunately the squad leader was nearby and saved his life. "I'm the squad leader. I said I would always protect you all. Just follow me." Riley asked the squad leader to help him complete the mission, but unfortunately, he remembered the mission location wrong and calculated all the coordinates wrong. Watching his squad leader being engulfed in the flames of the explosion, he turned and ran away again. Not long after, he was captured by the enemy. He tried to exchange secrets, but he was an Omega and was directly affected by the pheromones and went into fever. This time, he couldn't play pitiful and gain any protection. 22. After graduating from graduate school, I officially inherited my father's job title and became a mechanic and went to the front line. After Connor was injured, he dropped out of school and returned to his hometown to do business. I heard that his family introduced him to many blind dates, both ABO and gender, but he rejected them all without exception. He said he was waiting for someone to come home. I sent him an inflatable dummy that day and asked him to check his brain again. As the new year approaches, the entire base is immersed in a joyful atmosphere, except for Commander Gavin, who looks depressed and irritably searching for something on each floor. A tall, thin figure walked over from a distance, with long legs wrapped in marten boots, broad shoulders and narrow waist, and a cold and jade-like voice full of ridicule. "Can you please control your pheromones? Doesn't your child care about you during the susceptible period?" Gavin raised his eyes and called "Mason," without stopping the action of opening the door. "There's no one in the lounge." Gavin shouted "shit" in annoyance and turned to look for it on the next floor. Mason raised his eyebrows slightly and sneered at him. "Look at you, you look so hungry, TSK TSK." But soon, a tall man took him into his arms, burying his head in his neck and rubbing against him greedily. "Brother, I'm not full either, what should I do?" Gavin eventually found me in the maintenance room. I bent down to tighten the last screw and was about to wipe the oil off my face when I was suddenly lifted up and my body felt light. I could feel his hot breath coming from behind. Gavin slowly stretched out his tongue and licked my face. My face flushed instantly, but he said confidently, "Happy New Year. I'm here to pick up my New Year present." "What? Hey, stop biting me. I still have work to do." The unfinished words were lost in this hot and intense kiss. The two hearts were pressed tightly together, resonating at the same frequency. After an unknown amount of time, a piece of news popped up on our phones at the same time. Riley was exchanged back to China. This means that he will soon face trial and pay the price for all the mistakes he has made: murder, defection, frame-up. During the 4 years since he was arrested, he had already given birth to 4 children, and no Omega protection law could protect him. All this is the retribution he deserves. When he read the last line, a shrill alarm sounded in the base. Gavin's already gloomy expression became even uglier, and the pheromones were so thick that they were choking. I smiled and tapped his nose, then turned and ran to the gathering. When the sun rises, devote yourself to your career. When the sun sets, embrace your lover. I'm sorry, but I'll have to pick up Gavin's New Year's gift another day. Please bear with me.